Have you ever stopped to think that inside a tiny atom, invisible to our eyes, there exists a force so devastating that it can wipe entire cities off the map in a matter of seconds? It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, but it's real. It's terrifying, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. The nuclear bomb is probably the most powerful and terrifying invention humanity has ever created, and understanding how it works is to delve into a world where physics transforms into pure destruction. So take a deep breath, because what you're about to discover will completely change the way you see the power of science and the limits of what we are capable of doing. We'll start with the basics. But get ready, because this is going to get intense quickly. It all starts with the atom, that microscopic particle that forms absolutely everything around us. Each atom has a nucleus at its center, made of protons and neutrons, and electrons orbit around it. Now, what holds this nucleus together is a very strong nuclear force, because protons have a positive charge and should repel each other. But they don't, because there is an absurdly powerful binding energy keeping everything together. And here's the secret. When you manage to break this nucleus or join the nuclei of light atoms, you release a monstrous amount of energy. We're talking about energy millions of times greater than any common chemical reaction, like the explosion of dynamite or gasoline. Einstein was absolutely right when he wrote that famous equation E equals mc squared, which basically says that mass can be converted into energy. And when this happens in the atomic nucleus, the amount of energy released is simply insane. But hold on, things get even more interesting when we get into the types of nuclear bombs. There are basically two main types of nuclear bombs. The fission bomb, which was the first to be created and used in World War II, and the fusion bomb, also known as the hydrogen bomb or thermonuclear bomb, which is even more powerful and devastating. Let's talk about the fission bomb first, because it changed the world forever in 1945. Nuclear fission happens when you take a heavy atom, usually uranium-235 or plutonium-239, and bombard it with neutrons. When a neutron hits the nucleus of this heavy atom, it splits in half, dividing into two smaller atoms, and in this process releases a gigantic amount of energy in the form of heat, light, and radiation. But it doesn't stop there, because when this nucleus splits, it also releases 2 or 3 more neutrons that collide with other uranium or plutonium atoms around it, causing new fissions, which release more neutrons, which cause more fissions, and so on. This is what we call a chain reaction, and it happens in an absurd fraction of a second, releasing devastating energy all at once. To give you an idea, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima contained only about 64 kilograms of uranium, but the explosion was equivalent to 15,000 tons of dynamite. 15,000 tons. And all of this happened in less than a second. The entire city was practically vaporized, and more than 70,000 people died instantly, with tens of thousands more dying later from radiation. It's chilling just to imagine. But for this chain reaction to happen, you need what we call critical mass. If you have a small amount of uranium or plutonium, the released neutrons will escape from the material before colliding with other nuclei, and the chain reaction won't sustain itself. But when you gather enough uranium or plutonium, the neutrons become trapped within the mass, colliding with more and more nuclei, and boom, you have a nuclear explosion. The first atomic bombs used a very ingenious mechanism to gather this critical mass at the right moment. In the design called the cannon-type weapon, which was used in the Hiroshima bomb, you had 2 separate subcritical uranium pieces inside the bomb, and at the moment of detonation, conventional explosives fired one piece against the other at very high speed, bringing them together and instantly reaching the critical mass, initiating the chain reaction. In the implosion design used in the Nagasaki bomb and virtually all modern bombs, you have a plutonium sphere surrounded by conventional explosives arranged in perfect symmetry. When these explosives detonate simultaneously, they compress the plutonium sphere inward, increasing its density and reaching critical mass. This method is more efficient and allows for the use of less nuclear material, but it demands absurd precision in engineering. Now, if you think the fission bomb is terrifying enough, wait until you hear about the hydrogen bomb, the thermonuclear bomb. This one works through nuclear fusion, which is the opposite process of fission. Instead of breaking apart heavy atoms, you join light atoms, usually isotopes of hydrogen like deuterium and tritium, to form heavier atoms like helium. When this happens, an even greater amount of energy is released. The problem is that to initiate nuclear fusion, you need absurdly high temperatures and pressures. We're talking millions of degrees Celsius, the kind of conditions that only exist naturally in the core of the sun. And how do you achieve these conditions here on Earth? Simple. You use a fission bomb as a trigger. That's right. Inside a hydrogen bomb, there's a traditional atomic bomb that explodes first, creating the heat and pressure necessary to initiate the fusion of hydrogen atoms. When this happens, the energy released is hundreds or even thousands of times greater than a conventional fission bomb. The largest nuclear bomb ever detonated in history was the Tsar Bomba, tested by the Soviet Union in 1961, and it had a yield of 50 megatons, the equivalent of 50 million tons of dynamite. The explosion was so powerful that the shockwave circled the Earth 3 times, windows shattered 900 kilometers away, and the fireball was more than 8 kilometers in diameter. It's difficult to even process numbers like that. They're so absurd. And here's a question many people don't understand. The effects of a nuclear explosion go far beyond the explosion itself. When a nuclear bomb detonates, it creates 3 main devastating effects. First comes the heat and light wave, which is so intense that it vaporizes everything within a radius of hundreds of meters and causes third-degree burns kilometers away. Second comes the shock wave, a wall of compressed air moving at supersonic speeds, destroying buildings, uprooting trees, and hurling objects as if they were toys. And third, and perhaps the most terrifying, comes the radiation. The nuclear explosion releases an enormous amount of ionizing radiation, which penetrates living tissues, destroys cells, causes cancer, genetic mutations, and prolonged suffering that can last for decades. The victims of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs suffered from the effects of radiation for the rest of their lives, and their descendants still carry the genetic marks of that terrible day. Furthermore, the explosion creates what we call radioactive fallout, which are contaminated particles that rise into the atmosphere and then fall back to the ground like an invisible and deadly rain, spreading radiation over huge areas and contaminating the soil, water, and food for years or even decades. But there's a fascinating and simultaneously terrifying technical detail: how modern nuclear bombs work. Thermonuclear bombs generally have a design called the Tellurulum design, which uses multiple stages. In the first stage, the fission bomb explodes, creating X-rays that are reflected and directed to compress and heat the fusion fuel. In the second stage, when fusion begins, it can even include a third stage with a surrounding layer of uranium-2, which normally wouldn't fission, but under the extreme conditions created by fusion, it also undergoes fission, further increasing the power of the explosion. It's literally a bomb within a bomb within a bomb, each amplifying the destructive power of the previous one. And the most disturbing thing is that, theoretically, there is no upper limit to the size of a thermonuclear bomb. You can keep adding stages and increasing the power indefinitely, limited only by engineering and available materials. Now let's talk about something few people know, but that is absolutely crucial: manufacturing the nuclear material needed to make a bomb is extremely difficult and complex. Natural uranium found in nature is mainly composed of uranium-2, which is unsuitable for making bombs because it doesn't easily undergo fission. Only 0.7% of natural uranium is uranium-235, which is the isotope you need. To make a bomb, you need to enrich the uranium, increasing the concentration of uranium-235 to at least 90%, in a process called isotopic separation. This requires gigantic facilities and advanced technology, using methods such as centrifugation or gaseous diffusion, where you make the uranium go through thousands of separation stages until you get the highly enriched material. Plutonium-239 is even more complicated because it doesn't exist in nature. You need to produce it in nuclear reactors by bombarding uranium-238 wheat neutrons, and then reprocess the nuclear fuel used to extract the plutonium in a very dangerous chemical process. This is why nuclear arms control and non-proliferation are such serious issues in international politics. because the technical barrier to building a bomb is enormous, and countries closely monitor any attempt to enrich uranium or produce plutonium. And there's another factor that makes nuclear weapons even more terrifying: their speed and the impossibility of defense. An intercontinental ballistic missile equipped with nuclear warheads can travel from Russia to the United States in less than 30 minutes, reaching speeds of over 20,000 kilometers per hour. When it re-enters the atmosphere, there is no anti-missile defense system that can intercept all targets with certainty, especially when we are talking about dozens or hundreds of warheads being launched at the same time. It's the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, where if one country launches its nuclear weapons, the other country will have time to retaliate before the missiles arrive, ensuring that both sides are completely destroyed. It's an insane logic that kept the world in a tense equilibrium throughout the Cold War and still exists today. Currently, there are more than 13,000 nuclear weapons in the world, most in the hands of Russia and the United States, but also belonging to countries such as China, France, the United Kingdom, India, Pakistan, Israel, and North Korea. And the fear is not only of a nuclear war between superpowers, but also of the possibility of a nuclear weapon falling into the hands of terrorists, or of an accident that mistakenly triggers a war. But let me tell you something that will make you even more uneasy: the concept of nuclear winter. If a large-scale nuclear war were to occur, with hundreds or thousands of bombs being detonated, the amount of soot, dust, and debris released into the atmosphere would be so great that it would block sunlight for months, or even years. This would cause a drastic drop in global temperatures, destroy crops, lead to mass famine, and could cause the extinction of much of life on Earth, including humanity. Scientific studies show that even a regional nuclear war between India and Pakistan, using only 100 relatively small nuclear weapons, would be enough to release about 5 million tons of soot into the atmosphere and cause a global temperature reduction that would kill more than 2 billion people from starvation. It's an apocalyptic scenario that thankfully never happened, but remains a real possibility as long as these weapons exist. And why is this considered forbidden energy? Because the nuclear energy used in weapons is so powerful, so destructive, and so dangerous that there is an international consensus that it should never be used again. Treaties like the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty attempts to limit the spread of these weapons and eventually eliminate them completely. Countries constantly debate nuclear disarmament, inspections, nuclear weapon-free zones, and agreements to never use these weapons first. But at the same time, no nuclear power is willing to completely relinquish its arsenal because they see these weapons as a guarantee of security, as a power that ensures no one will attack them. It's a terrible paradox. The deadliest weapons ever created may be precisely what prevents them from being used, but they are also what could end everything if they ever are. So now you know how a nuclear bomb works, from the physics of atoms to the complex engineering that transforms theory into real destruction. You understand the difference between fission and fusion. You know what critical mass, chain reaction, thermonuclear bomb, radiation, and fallout are. You know the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the threat that still hangs over humanity with thousands of these weapons ready to be launched. It's heavy, frightening, but essential knowledge. And now tell me in the comments, do you think humanity should destroy all nuclear weapons? Or are they a necessary evil to maintain peace? Leave your opinion. I want to know what you think about it. And if you've made it this far and learned something new, don't forget to leave a like to help the channel grow and subscribe so you don't miss the next videos, because there's always fascinating and intriguing content coming. And since you're in this vibe of discovering amazing things, click on the video that's appearing on the screen now and continue discovering curiosities that will blow your mind. No pun intended. Thanks, and see you next time.